up, Mayor Pete? Go, Mayor Pete.
Let's go to a red-hot issue here in Washington. Your husband tweeted after Justice Brett Kavanaugh left a Washington restaurant due to protesters. The tweet reads, "Sounds like he just wanted some privacy to make his own dining decisions." Is that appropriate?
All right, so before Gay Pete, or the Rear Admiral as some call him, answers that question, let's get you introduced to GAMcast for July 11th. 2022. It is a cloudy day in Atlanta. It is an extremely slow news day. It's as slow a news day as I've seen in quite some time, which, of course, as you know, that means we have a ton to talk about, lots of things to talk about. We're going to talk about Kavanaugh being chased out of a Morton's in D.C. and whether or not that's appropriate, what's going on there. We're going to talk about the Twitter deal that is now apparently going to go to litigation. We're going to walk you through what that litigation will entail, what it would look like. We're going to update you on some important January 6th developments, and there's a couple out there, one involving Bannon, the other involving Cassidy Hutchinson. Also, there's going to be a hearing tomorrow, and we will live stream the 7th hearing. So if you're following us on the YouTube, you will definitely want to hit that subscribe button so you will get notified when we go live. We will go live tomorrow, probably 9:45. Hearing starts at 10. I may go at 9:30. It just sort of depends. But it will certainly be no later than 9:45. But anyway, subscribe. You won't have to worry about that. And then we'll got a bunch of other things to cover if we can get around to it. But it's going to take us a while to get through the first few things. So just so you know what's going on here. And I always get confused when people start talking about husbands. And it's two men here. How do they decide who's a husband and who's a wife? And anyway, but setting that aside. So anyway, Mayor Pete's partner. And this is a common thing among Democrats. Not as big a thing among Republicans, but it's a big thing among Democrats, and it all has. It just goes to show you that, again, we say this all the time, but Democrats don't believe in the rule of law. What is the rule of law? Abraham Lincoln said it best in the Gettysburg Address. It's government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Which means the people govern ourselves, and we don't treat people that are, the president or anything else like they're gods. They're just people like us, and we understand that they're people, so I don't really care what Buttigieg's wife or husband or whatever he is thinks about anything, frankly. But he's a big Twitter star now, as is a lot of the spouses. I mean, Dr. Jill Biden, the greatest of all doctors in the world, is now a star because she's married to the president. You notice, I can never remember her name, but Trump's wife, nobody ever cared what she thought. And it's consistently all the down the line. But the Democrats, they do this. And again, it's just more evidence that they believe in a different system of government than you and I. They just do at the end of the day. Okay, what's another thing we talk about all the time? We talk about the fact that they are just happy that the system is being broken down. That's why Pete can come out here and talk like this, right? He doesn't care because Pete knows enough because he's a communist, and he's a very bright communist. He knows enough to know every time you break down the American system and the rule of law, it defaults to us. It defaults to leftism. So we win either way. Heads we win, tails you lose. I don't care how you do it. So it used to be unthinkable that a Supreme Court justice would rule on a decision and that people would actually know who he was, where he is, any of that, and would actually go and protest the person while they're eating. This really came up big during the Trump years and has just been, as per usual, once they knock down a barrier, right, like a mob, there's nothing that stops the mob. The mob is just like an avalanche going down the mountain. And you're seeing this with Democrats now. Everyone knows that this is wrong. And I want you just to prove it's wrong. Name the last time you saw conservatives or Republicans or libertarians like me, whatever you want to call us, harassing Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Sotomayor, the wise Latina. Name the last time we went and disturbed them or protested them when they were trying to eat. Yeah, you can't because we never did because we respect the rule of law. We don't like the way she rules. I didn't like a lot of the decisions. In fact, I can think of nothing worse than reading a Sotomayor decision. We're going to do that this week. I know I said we'd get to it last week, and we did. We only got to one of them, but we're going to get to a couple more of those Supreme Court decisions because it looks like it's going to be a slow week. And when we get to them, you're going to see the reasoning of some of these. For example, I went through and did the Wisconsin. I did a quickie live stream last week on the Wisconsin decision striking down ballot drop boxes, which another reason, if you're still a podcast listener, that's fine. That's great. We're going to continue to do the podcast. We figured out how to do it easy. We can just dump it. It's really no problem to do it that way. But you really do get a lot more if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Because we were dumping things like that up there, and you wouldn't get them because we're not putting them on the podcast. But we went through the majority opinion, as you know we do. We pull the actual opinion up, we go through it, and we went through the dissent. And the dissent in the Wisconsin ballot box decision with 4-3, 3 in the dissent, they basically were like, yeah, we think it should be easier to vote, so ballot drop boxes are a good thing. Like, what? I mean, they didn't even bother to follow the law. They just made up these ridiculous arguments. And that's where the left is now. They can't defend what they do because it's ridiculous. And everyone knows it's ridiculous. So anyway, the other thing you got to know before you hear from the Rear Admiral is that this on my Twitter feed, because again, Twitter is 80% left-wing people, about 15% porn, and then there's about 5% of people like, the great American male that are allowed to put up something that actually makes any rational sense at all and actually educates people on the Constitution and what's going on. So anyway, the left loves this. So, I mean, I'm going to give you this right. So this is from Aaron Rupar. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can see that. Buttigieg, in response to Fox News asking about the appropriateness of his husband's tweet about Kavanaugh being protested at dinner, any public figure should be free from violence, intimidation, and harassment, but should never be free from criticism or people exercising their First Amendment right. They all celebrated that. Mark Hamill, well, I don't know why Luke Skywalker's getting into politics, and he really, I mean, frankly, he's not even really that good of an actor. I mean, I like Luke Skywalker. I like some other things he did before and after that. But look, folks, I mean, he's not that great of an actor, and he's even worse in politics. He doesn't know what he's talking about. This is not how it's done, folks. But again, it just goes to show the left is all about emotion. So without further ado, here's Gay Pete.
Look, when public officials go into public life, we should expect two things. One, you should always be free from violence, harassment, and intimidation. And two, you're never going to be free from criticism or peaceful protest, people exercising their...
All right, now, folks, let's just stop it right there, because that's literally, I say this all the time, they will debunk themselves within a page, within a paragraph, within a sentence. He just did it within a sentence, okay? Any public figure should be free from violence, intimidation, and harassment. What is it if I'm sitting down to eat, I'm hearing there's protests, and the people at Morton's go, sir, they're out there, they're protesting, we're going to take you out the back door, which is what happened to Kavanaugh. How is that not harassment and intimidation? It's the absolute definition of harassment, and it's not the absolute definition, it's the 98% definition of intimidation, right? And again, forgetting about Kavanaugh for a moment, and this is why the left, I mean, how he can look at the camera, and if you're watching on the YouTube, I've got him, shot there. He knows how to play the camera. I mean, he's got a stare gaze, he looks good, all that stuff. This is pure demagoguery. Anybody with just a modicum of sense knows that this is garbage. And there he goes. But you should never be free of criticism and people exercising their First Amendment right. You're not exercising your First Amendment right when you sit outside of a restaurant and harass someone into leaving. That's not a First Amendment right. What I'm doing now is a First Amendment right. If you don't want to hear this, guess what? Turn it off. Move to something else. Am I disturbing your dining habits? Heck no. Would I ever do it? No. I mean, it's just insanity. Just literal insanity. And again, this is where, folks, we are just no longer the same country. They don't believe in the same things we believe in. And they tell you every day. Let's let them talk a little bit further.
First Amendment rights.
Okay.
And that's what happened in this case. Remember, the justice never even came into contact with these protesters, reportedly didn't see or hear them. And these protesters are upset because a right, an important right, that the majority of Americans support was taken away.
Understood.
Not only the
Okay,
right-
so a right that the Supreme Court said never existed, it wasn't taken away. But, okay, so let me understand this. So these people are upset. They're upset. And if you're upset, apparently you go get to harass and intimidate somebody into leaving a place where they're dining. And the only reason he didn't come into contact with them is because they sent him out the back door, folks. I mean, folks, I don't want to belabor the point. We got a lot to get to. We've already around 9 minutes in here, folks. Again, it's regrettable that they control the media out there. But I do want you to know, I mean, that answer was literally hailed as gospel by the left this weekend. And it's continuing to be. Probably when you tune in the news and some other podcasts, you're going to hear that. That is one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life. And again, just remember, name the last time the right did that, when they were doing all kinds of decisions we didn't like. But anyway, the Twitter deal has blown up. Elon Musk formally announced a couple days ago, but he formally filed his with the SEC that he is not intending to go forward with the deal for for Twitter. So Twitter is no more, and we shall see what happens with that. But anyway, I thought I'd walk you through a little bit of the basics of because Twitter says they're gonna make him go through with the deal, and I'm not really sure how they're going to be able to do that. but apparently they're claiming they're going to be able to do it. So we shall see. Anyway, Twitter deal: company assembles team to sue Elon Musk over dropped takeover. That means they're going to try to sue him, make him pay the I think it was $54 he agreed to pay. The stock has been in a free fall. It's currently at about 36. So Twitter Inc. has hired merger law heavyweight Watchell, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz. It is a big firm, I think, out of New York, if I recall correctly, as it races to sue Elon Musk for moving to dump his $44 million takeover of the company, according to people familiar with the matter. The social media company aims to file a lawsuit this week, according to the people who declined to be identified because the matter is private. And it's also attorney-client privilege. By hiring Watchell, it gains access to lawyers, including Bill Savitt and Leo Strine, who served as Chancellor of the Delaware Chancellery Court, where the case will be heard. Most every corporation, folks, in the United States is based in Delaware for this reason, because they have very, very well-developed corporate law and litigation. So Musk has brought in Quinn Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan. I believe they're out of Chicago. The firm has led successful defense against defamation claim in 2019 and is representing him as part of its ongoing shareholder lawsuit over his failed attempt to take Tesla private in 2018. An official at Watchell Lipton declined to comment, and officials for Quinn Emanuel couldn't be reached. The Twitter spokesman declined to comment. Musk and Burchell, the head of the family office, did not respond. So basically nobody's talking out there, folks. Delaware, we already talked about that. So anyway, basically what the article talks about here is that the couple things that Musk is going to have to show. First and foremost, he claims that he wasn't given the appropriate diligence. So Twitter's going to have to beat back against that. The other problem that Musk claims to have had is that they were not candid about the amount of bots that are on the platform. According to Twitter, it's about 5%. According to Musk, it's much higher than that. I will be shocked if it's only 5%, folks, having quite a bit of dealings on Twitter. And folks, the other problem I think Twitter's going to have, I suspect they will not go forward, and I've had personal experience with this being on Twitter. I've been at 32,900 followers for now about 10 days. I used to pick up, without breaking a sweat, 25 to 50 followers per day, and I was just steadily increasing. And right around the time that Musk started wrangling and talking about this, you could tell the algorithm changed. So I wasn't getting near as many impressions, and I wasn't gaining as many followers. And that has to be manipulation one way or the other. In other words, they were either manipulating it for me to get followers before, or now they're manipulating it for me not to get followers now. But it's easy enough for them to figure out if there's bots or not, and they know that. The algorithm is pretty strong, and that's why, for example, you see it kicking off certain people, but not other people. I mean, they know what they're doing, and I've never understood this. I've never understood a company who claims to be a platform. What does the platform do? A platform says, "Hey, this is literally a place for you to come and share your voice and interact with other people." So Twitter is a platform, Facebook is a platform, Substack is a platform. Rumble is a platform. YouTube is a platform. All these things are platforms. And the whole idea of being a platform is you're a bookie. You make money off the float. So if people share and their advertisements or subscriptions that go, you get a piece of the action. So you would think, as long as you're not violating the law, if you're violating the law, sure, you should be taken down. But if you're not violating the law, and in America, there's very little violates the law as it relates to speech, right? Then what do you care? The more clicks, the better. But these people do care. And of all the people that care, believe me, Twitter is one of the worst. YouTube is not far behind. I mean, you live every day on these platforms, fear that they're just going to shut you down or, cut you off. Now, I've never had a problem with either. I've told you about this stuff I've had with respect to the copyright stuff on YouTube, but I've never really had a problem with Twitter other than the fact that they're obviously doing something with my feed. So we'll see what's going to come of that. But a couple of interesting theories out there. As you'll see down here at the bottom, I'll highlight this up for you. The judge also have a say over whether the breakup fees must be paid in the Musk Twitter deal. The fee is $1 billion. So what's going on there is a couple things. Is that Musk is going to have to show that the deal was materially breached, right, or a material adverse change in circumstances, right? And so the two things I think he's going to really rely on, first and foremost, is they did not give him sufficient, or they've made some changes in the way that they've been doing business. after he agreed to buy the team. So he's going to say, hey, there's a material adverse change. Typically, I haven't seen the contract yet. If it comes out, in the Great American Mail, we go right to the documents. We'll take a look at the document. But I have litigated this several times in my career. Typically, a material adverse change is defined. So typically, it's defined in some major circumstance, such as you losing 10% of your workforce or 10% of your customer base. It's also usually defined in, loss of revenue of a certain amount. So when you're talking about a $44 billion deal, probably would be, material loss would be, somewhere in the tens or maybe hundreds of millions, something like that. I don't know if those things have occurred or not. The other thing is going to be whether or not they were honest in terms of their representation. So he's going to argue that you claiming it was about 5% is not honest as to, a material thing about how much bots. And so if he can prove either of those things, he will not have to pay it. The thing that Musk is out there doing is he's out there laughing and mocking them. And it's like, how are you going to make me go through with a $44 billion purchase? So there's a little bit to be said for that. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the old story, but, if somebody owes you $1,000, you send somebody out to break his legs. If somebody owes you $1 million, you put your arm around him and go, hey, buddy, how are we going to figure this out? Which is to say, if he doesn't have the $44 billion and his investors aren't behind him because he's not going to buy the company, you're going to have a hard time getting that $44 billion. So my guess is what's going to happen, at some point they'll come in here and they'll work it out. They'll either work it out in the sense that Musk will pay some reduction on the $1 billion walk-away fee, or more likely, if he still wants Twitter, he will negotiate a lower price. So if the other price was $44 billion, then he'll say, hey, I'll give you $30 billion for it, and then that's how it'll work out. But we shall see. It's going to go to litigation. That's wonderful because that'll just be more for us to cover. That'll actually be something that's right up our alley, and we'll, of course, cover it. One other thing I wanted you to know about this Twitter deal, there are some people out there running up a theory, and again, if it's true, good for Musk, but the theory goes something like this, that he played sort of, three-dimensional chess with these guys, which is to say he wanted to cash out a bunch of Tesla stock. If you cash out a bunch of Tesla stock, that tanks your stock price usually, because when people see the founder of the company selling a bunch of stock so he can raise cash, right? People go, oh, that's not good. He must not have faith in his own company. I mean, you've seen Zuckerberg do that before, and he sold a bunch of Facebook stock, and the stock price tanked. So that could be what's going on here. And then the theory is he was able to cash out, I don't know, I think it's about $8 billion of Tesla he sold. He gets to cash that out, and he goes, oh, no, I'm just selling it because I got to buy Twitter. I got to put up some cash to buy Twitter. Has nothing to do with how I feel about Tesla, right? So he gets to take that money, and then if he ends up having to pay a fee, or you pay lawyers, no big deal, right? The fees and the lawyers will be a loss against whatever profit he got on the stock. So just wanted you to know about that theory. It seems to me that's a little far-fetched. I have a feeling that Musk does want to buy Twitter. And I tell you, the reason is just my experience on Twitter. I think if Twitter would get out of its own way and just be a platform, I think it could become a very profitable place, because there is a lot of disagreement out there that is tamped down. And what the left doesn't understand is that disagreement would bring a lot of clicks, and a lot of clicks would bring a lot of revenue. So I think he's probably going to go forward with it, but we shall see. So the other big story coming out over the weekend, this broke right after we finished the broadcast the other day, so we didn't get to it. So there's a lot going on with the January 6th committee, a couple of big developments you'll want to know about. So one of the developments that's going on out there is that the committee has apparently reached an agreement with Steve Bannon. Bannon is going to allow them to Bannon is allegedly going to testify. So we don't know if that's going to go through, but he's working out a deal to testify. So, and as also you should know that Trump has told him, hey, I will waive any executive privilege. You can go and testify to these people. And he's trying to negotiate to testify live. All right. So that's one thing you got to know. So Bannon has come out over the weekend and says, hey, I want to testify live. Well, I've been telling you from the very beginning that the January 6th committee is completely illegitimate. And this is yet another time that they've proven that they're completely illegitimate, okay? Because they are basically negotiating with him to testify. I think they want to test him to testify behind closed doors, not live. He wants to testify live. Well, last night, and this is from our friend, if you're on the Twitter, you can see her here. This is from our friend Joyce Aline. She's now a talking head on MSNBC. She's a former Obama prosecutor. She writes on Substack, so she's cashing in on her fame on the left. She's got almost a million Twitter followers here, and she teaches, I believe, at the University of Alabama, although I'm looking at her bio now, and it doesn't look like she is in there anymore. Maybe not. Yeah, she still has University of Alabama Law School. So she's teaching your babies to hate America and the Constitution. Anyway, DOJ correctly moves to keep Bannon's jury from hearing about his charade, quote, waiver of executive privilege by Trump and his own 11th hour claim he's now willing to testify because they're irrelevant to his failure to bring documents to appear last September. Now, so here's what's going on. So last night, after midnight, okay, there's no reason to file it at that point. Okay, it's just a stunt. All right, I've been filing things for a long time. The computer will now take it. Back in the old days, couldn't do that. You had to file it in person. You had to wait for the clerk to open up. But anyway, the computer will take it at any time, of course. So they file this as a little bit of a charade, and they're basically going, hey, he's supposed to go to trial next week. Well, everybody knows this is how this works, folks. You say you're going to go, you go fight back and forth. Their next move, since you won't testify, you're claiming executive privilege. Your next move is to say, okay, fine. And then their next move is to try to get you indicted for contempt of Congress and so on. So we all knew if the point of what we're doing here is to get him to testify, the DOJ would be like, oh, that's great. You're now going to cooperate? Oh, well, we'll drop the contempt charges. No problem. We just wanted you to testify. Why would you go forward with a jury trial if you really just wanted the testimony? You wouldn't. You would be like, absolutely, here's a deal, let's work this out and go testify. They're not interested in testimony at all. Now, some people will say, and again, you know me, I believe in being fair, I believe in giving you both sides. What they could say is this filing of this was just to put more pressure on him for him to then waive having to appear in person and let him waive appear by deposition. But again, it still makes the same point. If that's what they're trying to do, then why do they want him to testify outside of our presence? Why don't we get to see this? What is so urgent about January 6th, now, well over a year and a half ago, that Bannon has to testify behind closed doors, folks? It's nothing more than, I say this all the time, they know everything favors them. Every time you destroy just a little bit of the rule of law, which I think the rule of law, right, is like a big chunk of ice is sitting out there. Every day they just chip a little bit off of it, chip a little bit off of it, chip a little bit off of it. You're going to come back in maybe a year, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. If this continues the way it's going, there'll be no more ice left. That's what they're doing. I mean, it's just, and again, this woman over here who claims to believe in the rule of law, the Constitution, she's cheering this. And again, I know she knows enough to know that she's completely full of it, okay? So what else is going on with the January 6th committee? Well, they also, in addition to the Bannon revelations, which showed that they don't really want to get at the truth, it turns out that over the weekend, January 6th committee didn't specifically ask Cipollone about Hutchinson's testimony on legal consequences of going to the Capitol during the riot, sources say. So what's going on here? Well, you'll remember because we covered all of these hearings, and you'll recall I told you. And if you want to, if you're listening on the YouTube, you can check it out. If you're listening to the podcast, you can go to the YouTube channel, check it out. We did a single issue live stream on how the committee impeached their own witness a couple of times, right? And this was one of the times that they impeached her. And we're going to play it for you from our broadcast of the 6th hearing in a second. But what happened during the hearing was that she was talking about conversations with various people leading up to January 6th, okay? And when she started talking about those things, at some point she said, well, I was talking to Pat Cipollone, who was one of the counsel for the White House at the time, and he said something on the order of, I'm going to play it for you, so don't worry, you don't have to memorize this, but he said something along the lines of, Cassidy, you don't need to be going to the Capitol. Don't go to the Capitol. If you go to the Capitol, you're going to be charged with every crime imaginable. Now, I'm going to play that for you in a moment. It's a little bit of a long bit, but take a listen to it. And we're going to come back. And then once you know that, and then subsequent to her testifying, so a couple weeks later, now Friday, Cipollone comes in, again, not for live testimony, but for a deposition that they then tape, and then they can then play to you little bits of whatever they want you to hear. Not the whole thing. Which, again, folks, I every day I think about this and hear about this, it just continues to amaze me that this is happening in a free country. I mean, I can't believe people aren't rioting in the streets over this. But anyway, here's the exchange that is pertinent for what you need to know about the point about Pat Cipollone in a moment. Here you go. And again, I may break in here. I don't remember because I live streamed it, but you'll hear the familiar voice of the Great American Male. This is from the live stream that I did on June 28th. Take a listen.
With Pat Cipollone about his concerns about the president going to the Capitol on January 6th?
On January 3rd, Mr. Cipollone had approached me knowing that Mark had raised the prospect of going up to the Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Cipollone and I had a brief private conversation where he said to me, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. This would be legally a terrible idea for us. We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that day. And he then urged me to continue relaying that to Mr. Meadows, because it's my understanding that Mr. Cipollone thought that Mr. Meadows was indeed pushing this along with the president.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that you also spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th as you were about to go to the rally on the Ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
All right, so there you go. That was a pertinent testimony that you needed to hear. Now, having heard, she testified to that on June 28th of 2022. So that, again, approximately 10 days later, on July 8th, 2022, the very Pat Cipollone, who apparently on January 6th, the morning of, said to her, Cassidy, make sure that movement to the Capitol doesn't happen. We're going to get charged with every crime in the book. Right now, a couple things before I get back to this. But again, now let's read this article and I'll tell you that. So January 6th, it didn't specifically ask Cipollone about Hutchinson's testimony on legal consequences of going to Capitol during riot. Why not? I mean, that should have been the first flipping question out of their, why wasn't it? Well, because they don't care about the truth. They don't want any contradiction of testimony. They're not looking to get to and say, okay, let's figure it out. Because what she testified to is, well, it's not hearsay because, I mean, it actually is hearsay because it's an out-of-court statement. But if you ask directly what you were told by the witness, there's certain exceptions you can get it in. But look, anyway, so a little bit of this article. Two people familiar with the Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone's testimony Friday told CNN that the House Select Committee investigating January 6, 2021 did not ask him if he told then White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson the day of the attack that they would get charged with every crime imaginable if they were at the U.S. Capitol, right? And it goes on, and basically, the left just completely lying about everything. Gacy goes on and says, hey, yeah, he corroborated everything. Well, of course he corroborated everything if your view of corroborating is if we don't ask you about it, and then he doesn't tell you a different version. Again, just goes to show this is all not about getting at the truth. If it was about getting at the truth, you would ask the witness, did she say this, did you not? And again, it's just shocking that they would leak. Frankly, they would leak this out. But again, the whole left, they just make up whatever they want. They spent the whole weekend, and they're going to spend the whole week here saying that Cipollone corroborated her, and they got more testimony, and the walls are closing in, and all this garbage. So, and again, I just want you to understand, one of the things about these folks that makes them so frustrating is, even assuming for the sake of the argument that he said that, we don't really know. And what he means unless you ask him, and apparently they didn't, right? The other thing is whether you said it or not, yes or no, because she's reporting you did. If you did, what did you mean by that? Well, the January 6th committee wants you to believe that what it means is, oh my God, you knew you were going to commit crimes. You knew darn well that's why you said it. Well, let me give you another explanation, folks, right? And again, you dealing in the Trump White House, if I were your general counsel, which as an attorney I could be, I would literally say, if you go forward with this, they're going to charge you with every crime in the book because they're corrupt and they don't care. They're going to charge you. So don't do it. In other words, this is a setup. In other words, they're just going to charge you with anything every time you move, which is consistent with what they did for about, 4 years. So the whole thing there was basically like, just avoid it to avoid, the incoming administration. The other thing you have to know is at this point, January 6, 2021, Cipollone is in the camp, right? The camp that basically said, look, there's nothing you can do to overturn the election. Trump is still of the belief that if he denies Biden's certification on the 6th and it goes back to the House or it goes back to the states, it's possible he's not certified and it's possible the House elects him. So, but Cipollone's in the camp that doesn't believe that and is like, look, you're going to get charged. To wit, Biden is corrupt, and he's going to use this to charge you with any and everything he can. So we have covered a lot of ground. I didn't think I was going to be this far in 29 minutes. So that's good. Anyway, all right. So I thought I'd give it a little bit. I've been looking into this myself, and as you know, we do our best. I mean, 99% of the time we go to left-wing sites to demonstrate our points. So you've been seeing out there, and if you're on the YouTube, you can see that we're at the 538. And if you want to go to it yourself, you're welcome. If you listen on the podcast, it's literally 5 spelled out, 30 spelled out, 8 spelled out, all together, 538.com. If I put in 538 blog, because it used to be a blog for the New York Times, it's Nate Silver's outfit. That's how I get to it. But anyway, they used to be a really good data site, and they're not as good a data site as they used to be. It's regrettable because they've just gotten lefter and lefter and lefter and more emotional and more emotional and more emotional. So whereas their models used to be just spot on and almost always correct, now they're not quite as good, but they're still one of the better models out there. And so if you go there, you've got a model prediction, for example, the governor's races in the fall, the Senate forecast, the House forecast. You've got a good breakdown of how popular is Joe Biden. And one of the things that their model does, or their models do, and I like this about them, is they'll take the polls and then they'll go in and look at the internals of the polls and correct for certain things that the polls are doing inappropriately. So by way of example, if I wanted Biden to have a higher approval rating and I was not a person of good faith, which as you know I am, but if I weren't, right, what I would do is I would just make sure that I added a few more percents of Democrats into what the electorate would be. So let's just say, for example, that typically an election, my best guess is you've probably got 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, and then 20% independent. It may be 38, 37. You get the idea, right? What you can do if you want to make somebody have a higher approval rating or a little bit chance of winning a race is just bump up what you predict. So I think this electorate is going to be 42% Democrat, like it was in the 30s of America, right? And again, that's garbage. So they'll go in and they'll true for that and then give you the real poll numbers, and then they'll aggregate those polls to get to their prediction. So just to give you an idea, they have the Republicans having an 80% chance, 87% chance to win the House in November. One other thing is I encourage you to go to these guys. It's really good. It's an interactive model. So when you understand that, that means they ran the model 100 times, and that means 13 times Democrats prevailed and controlled the House. The other 87 times Republicans prevailed and controlled the House, right? And so you can look at each one of the elections. So when you get to the Senate, and we're going to click on that, you'll see that it was a 54% chance. Or again, they ran the model 100 times, 54 times, Republicans came out with control of the Senate. So we're going to click on that one, and what you'll see here is you'll see that there was, and again, they don't do a really good job of laying it out here, but there are several different possible outcomes here. One where the Republicans have 51, 52, 53, and 54 seems right now to be the most likely. So I wanted to focus on one race here and the one here in Georgia. And the reason I wanted to focus on that today is, just sort of give you an update on what's going on with these models and give you a good place to look as we get, November's a ways away, but, we're getting closer and closer to it. And so the best way is to look at it over time. And if you look at their model, they also have a way for you to look at how the model's gone over time too, so you can check that out. But I wanted to focus on this one race, and that would be the race of Georgia. So let's click on that one, and you can click on the individual race. And right now it has Georgia. Apparently they've run it's gone up from this morning, actually, when I first checked. So they've run that model 100 times. Herschel Walker won 56 of them. Raphael Warnock won 44 of them. And if you scroll down here, you'll see the polls. And part of the reason that Walker's gone up a little bit lately is that the Data for Progress poll that came out from July 1st to the 6th has Walker winning 49-47 over Raphael Warnock. So that bumped up his chances in the model, of course. But I wanted to bring that up because I covered last week, I believe, or maybe in the week before, I covered the poll out there that had Kemp and Abrams tied 48-48, but had Warnock up 10. And I want you to understand how ridiculous, I said at the time how ridiculous that poll was. There's no way that's the case. None. Zip. Zilch. Nada. No way. No how. Warnock wins that by 10 points. And Quinnipiac, which used to be, in fact, if you're looking at it here on the Twitter, they're given a rating of A-, right, which is slightly better than the Data for Progress, which is given a rating of B, okay? But 538 knows that. So I just wanted to update you here and let you know that we follow this stuff closely. We know what's going on. I predict Herschel Walker is going to win this, and I think right now, all else being equal, I think the Republicans will probably pull it out and take the Senate. That's really key. They really need to take the Senate. And the main reason they need to take the Senate, and people miss this, is the House is great. That'll keep you from being able to do any legislation. But the Senate is critically important because all new nominations have to go through the Senate. And so there could be another Supreme Court nomination. They've got a lot of these people that are out there that Biden is putting into all these positions. And we talked last week about the person that's now running the group that it goes and checks on corporate fraud and things like that, who's just a complete radical. And see, that person was able to get through on a 50-50 commonly breaking the tie. So it is critically important that Republicans take the Senate. Right now, it looks like they will. So couple of four more stories here. We're going to get them all in and finish well in under 40 there. So this is good. So I noticed this in the Hill. Schumer making last-ditch bid to pass reconciliation bill this summer. If you go to our Substack page, greatamericanmail.substack.com, and it's M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E, greatamericanmail.substack.com, all one word, don't put WW before it. I believe that was our first article ever that we wrote that eventually they're going to come back to Build Back Better. So I just wanted to update you. I mean, they're talking here. They're trying to get a deal where they can impose a 3.8% tax on individuals earning more than $400,000. A bunch of CEOs are going to go, yeah, this is a great idea, it's a great idea, and say, okay, yeah, they're going to do that, and then next year they'll come hit that same 3.8 tax on the rest of us. So I'm not in favor of raising taxes on anybody, and they talk about a bunch of other things that are in there, and they're trying to highlight all these little things that are in there, lowering the price of insulin, things of that nature. Folks, don't fall for it, but I predicted they would do this, and I knew they were always going to do it, and here's why. Because, A, they want to be able to put little new goodies in there, of course. But here's the big problem with this bill. You'll remember one of the many provisions that went in there was an ability to spy on every every single solitary citizen's bank account, right? And I think they had a threshold of $10,000 in a year or something, and they were like, well, we'll move it back and forth. And Janet Yellen, she of the I didn't see inflation coming, was like, well, we just need to get, we're not going to spy on people, please. Folks, that's all this is about, right? They just want to get one more chance because they can get another reconciliation bill, stick that in there. They may start with it at $100,000, but eventually, again, once they get to 100, it'll just be like the camel's nose up under the tent. They'll be spying on everybody's bank account without having to go through an audit. So last story of the day, this has been going on a while out there, and I just didn't have time because of the news. We had other important news, but the Democrats have been talking about this time and time again, all right? So let's just go to Amy Klobuchar. And again, the reason I went with Klobuchar, I could have gone with a lot of others. The reason I went with Klobuchar is she is one of these persons that's put out there as a quote-unquote moderate, right? Oh, she's just a moderate, just like Scranton Joe, just a moderate Democrat, in the middle or whatever. No, she's not. And again, the problem with her is she may have been moderate-ish for the Democrat Party 10 years ago. But she's just lurched left. She's one of these people that goes with the mob and continues the Democrats slide off the deep end, right? And so one of the things that that they're not moderate anymore is they now believe in the completely not moderate, completely fascist, socialist, communist, leftist idea that if you win a quote-unquote election, you can do whatever you want. And if you don't believe that, folks, you're just not paying attention because every single solitary opinion, every judge thing they do, everything they tweet, we're going to get to it in a minute here, that's all they talk about. If we can do whatever we want. We can make you wear a mask. Where's the authority to do that in the Constitution? Yeah, whatever. Where's the bill? Let's just forget about the Constitution. Let's assume you do have the authority in the Constitution. Where's the bill you passed that said you can take us wear masks? Oh, no, it's somewhere in the CDC's authority from 1946. Where? Oh, it's this little sentence right here, buried halfway in these 4 letters right here. That's what it is. And again, that's what they believe. Now, if that's the kind of government you want, that's fine. I mean, again, I don't need agreement. I want clarity. Let's be clear about what she believes. Anyway, so here's her tweet. The stakes are clear. If we elect 2 more pro-choice Democratic senators in November, we can codify Roe v. Wade into law. We can do this. Let's get it done. Now, folks, they can't do that. And if they do that, right, then it'll be struck down by the Supreme Court because there's no authority. The only reason the states can regulate abortion is it's under the police power, which they have. folks. And again, this is the last thought I'm going to give you. It's not about abortion, folks. I've told you that. It hasn't been about abortion for years. I saw over the weekend that they're doing everything they can to make the after pill, the pill you can take and basically have you abort or miscarry the fetus, is already like I think it's the biggest way to abort fetuses. So it's no longer about abortion. If they wanted to, they can get anybody an abortion. They got the network to do it. They got the money to do it. It's all about the issue. And that's why she's doing this. But the bigger important thing here is, again, they don't care about the Constitution. They don't bother with it. It's just, we get elected, we do whatever we want. Anyway, if that's the kind of government you want, that's what you're going to get if you have Democrats in November. So anyway, you are now all caught up today with the news of the day. And if you enjoyed this live stream, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.